Hello, world. This is Hello Chaos, the podcast about the ups and downs, ins and outs, struggles and triumphs of entrepreneurship. I am your host, Jennifer Oladipo. I'm riding solo today. My host, the other Jennifer Sutton, is out today, but I am so excited to have on the show our guest, Nika White of Nika White Consulting, who is just a total dynamo in her field. And we're going to talk a lot about what's going on with her these days and transitioning into the next phase of business. Hi, Nika.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks so much for having me. It's so good to be reconnected with you.
Yeah, it's good to, I mean, we've known each other for some years now, I guess. And
Yes.
I know Jennifer's probably disappointed to miss this conversation because she had been.
I can catch up with Jennifer anytime. No, I hope
That's
you feel
true.
better, Jennifer.
Yeah, sending her well wishes. I've known you through a few iterations of your business, employed career, and then on your own, and all in between and at the same time, it seems. So just tell us a little bit about your business, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, this will be very familiar to you, Jennifer, but for the broader audience, my name is Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, and I serve as the founder and lead principal consultant of a boutique management consulting firm under my brand name, Nika White Consulting, or NWC for short. And we exist to help intersect the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership in business, working with all types of clients, different industries, different sizes, different sectors, really helping those organizations to integrate into their business frameworks strategic diversity, intentional inclusion, and a lens of equity.
Love it. You got that pitch down.
Thanks. I've had
Yeah.
lots of years of practice.
Yeah. So let's see. How long has, I mean, I guess how old is your consultancy? Because it
Yeah.
seems like you were doing that in parallel, like a lot of people starting up while doing
Yeah.
other work.
Right, you're correct, Jennifer. So I've been doing this work for quite a number of years, but specifically doing it as a founder of my own company for a little over 5 years. We just celebrated our 5th year anniversary this past February.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
so, thank you. It is a really exciting milestone. But to your point, leading up to that, there certainly was an exit strategy where I was planning for that initial launch of NWC, and I think that's critically important as well. So hopefully, we'll have an opportunity maybe to get into that, the importance of
Mm-hmm.
planning in advance. But I was fortunate in that when I launched NWC, I immediately day one had one significant anchor client that I had already had an established relationship with. I was
Mm-hmm.
actually a W-2 employee at this, anchor client, and they said, we want you to fly and be free, but we don't want to lose the equity of the DEI work that you have established for us. And so we want to become your first client. And so that gave me a lot of ability from day one to not feel the pressure of having to go and hunt, right?
Mm-hmm.
While I was certainly focused on building up my client roster, it was good to be able to knowing that when I opened the doors, I had one solid client that I was already partnered with, creating some pretty successful results for. So yeah.
So what kind of problems or issues were you able to work out when you open the doors and it's not like a Hunger Games situation?
I love that analogy. Yes. Well, for me, it gave me an opportunity to not feel that on day one I had to be, so focused on building the business by way of clientele. I was able to continue to serve that particular client, as well as Jennifer. I guess I should mention that my partner and I, my husband of 25 years, we had spent a good bit of time supporting his season of entrepreneurship. So when it was my turn, I also had the luxury of being able to rely on, the time to really build the business, create the structure, create the infrastructure, make sure I was really hyper focused on what we are and what we're not, which is equally important. And so that gave me the freedom of not having to, immediately think about revenue goals. While that was
Mm-hmm.
certainly in the back of my mind, I would have to say that my situation was really unique, I guess, in some regards, in that day one, I was really focused on building and creating that structure so that as we continue to add clients on, we knew that we would have a solid foundation upon which we can build.
Yeah. And so I'm going to do the quick fast forward that Jennifer usually doesn't let me do. She likes to get more in the details. But got a great launch pad. You get to start your company and really like work on your vision and a good
Yeah.
foundation. And then now you're in another growth mode again, it sounds like.
Yes, I am in a growth mode. And so, for me, the initial years of NWC, I was unclear about whether or not I wanted to really scale and grow in terms of have this large enterprise with several different colleagues and teammates as employees. I mean, I knew that I wanted to have a subset of employees, but in terms of exactly what that looked like and what that threshold number would be, I was uncertain. My why, if I were to back up a second, was because of freedom. I really do care deeply about this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I feel like it's part of my calling and my purpose. And so that level of enjoyment for that discipline
Mm,
certainly helped motivate me to want to be able to do this on my own terms. And when I say on my own terms, this work can be really hard. And when you care deeply about the work, you have convictions that won't allow you just to accept any kind of answer, right? You really are looking for impact and that
yeah.
change. And sometimes when you do this work inside of organizations, there's some confines that don't necessarily allow you to fully see the results in a way that for me helps me to sleep well at night, right?
Yeah.
And so knowing that, part of my why was to be able to have the flexibility and the fluidity to be able to say yes and no to opportunities that I felt where I really could have an impact. I also love the idea of the freedom from a standpoint of being able to pick and choose where I would extend myself to the business. There are other interests that I have as well that are equally important to me. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm someone who's deeply grounded in ministry work and in volunteerism. And so I wanted to be able to have an organization that did not rely on me every single day to be in the
Mm,
trenches of
mm-hmm.
executing the work. And so I quickly realized that in order to do that, I needed to build my leadership bench. It could not just be a focus on me delivering all of the services as well as being the visionary, the executor, and so I set out on a path. Once I had that epiphany, I set out on a path to really actualize upon that. And so part of our growth mode has a lot to do with building out my leadership bench, as well as you can imagine, Jennifer, this space is really well in demand right now. There are a
Yeah.
lot of organizations that have over the past few years, because of many different events, particularly unfortunate events, that have increased people's appetite to want to be in this space, to lead in this work, to commit
Mm.
to more of a forward way of thinking and engaging in DEI. And so that's where we are. And we've been fortunate to be able to create a really solid team, if I can say so myself.
Yeah. So we'll get into that in a minute. But so I'm wondering, back when you were deciding, like, do I want to scale? Do I want a team? How much do I want to do with that kind of thing? What were the issues that you were weighing?
Well, the first thing is that I knew that I had founded the company under my brand name, Nika White Consulting. And so the client roster that I had at the time, a lot of them were so accustomed to me delivering the
Mm.
work, me being the
Hmm.
subject matter expert. And so I certainly had to deal with some inquiries of, well, if we were to, hire your firm, would we get Nika, right?
Right.
And so I started taking some slow steps towards shifting a little bit, because the bottom line is that my hiring philosophy is that I want to hire people that bring superpowers that maybe I don't have, right? And
Hmm.
so for someone to say, Nika, are you going to be the one serving us and doing the work? It required me to build up a solid team of professionals and practitioners that could add value where maybe I could not, or at least
Hmm.
not to the level of the expertise that they could. So that certainly shaped my hiring philosophy. Prior to that, especially when the volume of work was really heavy, I was hiring passionate people that cared about the work, that had, some great skill sets, but they weren't necessarily subject matter experts.
Hmm.
And I often say that passion only gets you but so far. You have to align
Right.
both will and skill, right?
Yeah.
And so I realized that my hiring philosophy needed to evolve and it needed to shift. And that was a really difficult time, because what it required is to really look across my organization and to do a reorg. And
Mm.
with the reorg, there comes a lot of decisions that are hard to make, but it was necessary. And I had to, as a founder, lean into that role and that leadership capacity, and make the right call that I knew was going to be instrumental towards the ultimate vision, the evolved vision, for NWC. And
What were,
so that's what I had
oh,
to
I'm
do.
sorry. Yeah. Well, I was going
No.
to ask, so what were some of the hardest things to let go of?
Some of the people that were
Mm.
actually a part of our team. As I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned before, some of those individuals were brought on during a time after George Floyd, where so many organizations who were not yet engaged in this work began to take heed to the need to not sit on the sidelines, but to start really leveraging their influence as organizations that are staples in their community, or have a big presence in the community, to start engaging more deeply. And with that, there was an influx of work that was coming our way. I say to many people that during that time, post George Floyd, it was really bittersweet because um, all DEI practitioners, at least all of those that were in my network, were inundated at that time with calls and requests for services. People were really trying to align with resources to help them navigate. What do we do? How do we stand in solidarity with our Black and Brown colleagues? How do we help, support our colleagues in a way that's meaningful? And that really occupied a lot of our time. And so
Yeah.
with that influx of new work, we needed to have additional people that could help support the volume of work. And so we went on a process of recruiting, and we ended up hiring multiple employees. And then what I realized was that I was focused on getting warm bodies of passionate people that had some great skill sets, but were not necessarily aligned with the future of my organization in terms of the service offerings that we knew needed to be deep and rich and more in
Mm.
depth and customized. And so, when you said, what did it cost us? It cost us some of our people. And I know cost is really some strength, some very, I would say intense language around that, because when I say that
Mm.
it cost us, really what I'm thinking about is the aspect of, no founder ever wants to be placed in a position where you have to, transition people, out of the organization. But, I also think that that's the time that I grew as a founder. I had to
Mm.
make those hard calls, and they were the right calls, whether or not everyone who was involved realized it at that time. Um, I truly believe that it was a decision that was necessary, not only for the business growth and but also for all the individuals that were impacted.
Yeah. So what are you looking at when you're like, okay, everything is, you're looking at where you want to go and where you are and realizing that you have to make some really big changes. And that includes like personnel changes, which are,
Yeah.
obviously some of the hardest. What do you, I mean, what's your sort of either rubric or where do you go to? What's your sounding board for checking yourself on those decisions, or how, what I mean? Or what's your guidepost, I guess, when it's time, when those times come?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, every founder needs to be crystal clear about the mission of the organization and the vision and the why. Why helps drive the how and the what. And so for me, once I became crystal clear on that, I knew that I had to make some decisions. And so that's what I encourage all founders and business leaders to do, is to make sure that you're always being grounded on your why. And for me, my why required that reorganization, and reimagining where we were going and from a future state. um, and I will say that our guiding principles were really deeply rooted in our vision, our mission, and our core values.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, as I was going through this period of reimagining and reorg, I also had to revisit what our core values were. And some of our core values ended up being refined, but that was really the litmus test for um, how in which I was going to be making some really critical operation decisions, including personnel, needs.
Mm-hmm.
So that, yeah, that's what was really the guiding post for my organization.
Yeah. So this thing of, okay, it's time to grow. Nika's stepping back. She's not going to be the one at every meeting. She's not going to be doing all the service delivery. Like that is such a huge
Yes.
challenge when you've built your clientele, because it's like your your reputation, and it's you they're trusting. And now it's like, so how did you have those conversations to get folks to extend that trust now to your team as you grew?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the onus was on me to first and foremost make really strategic hiring decisions. And so as I've used the language, I was building my leadership bench. Before I was trying to address capacity need, but I
Mm-hmm.
shifted to now I'm building my leadership bench. And so that automatically puts you into a different mental state as you're thinking about who do you want to come on that can serve in your stead, that can represent you in your absence. And so I think that the trust was in my communication to our clients of why we are doing this reorg, what we're hoping to accomplish. And so sometimes if you could just be communicative about the why, I think that it helps people to embrace the change to come. And then I also was really focused on, getting the right people in the right seats. And I spent a good bit of time providing that guidance, that foundation. While I certainly did not want those new leaders to come into the organization feeling like they have to do things the way that I do them, I wanted to at least make sure there was clarity around the NWC way and the standards,
Mm-hmm.
and where there could be some fluidity and how in which we execute to that. So knowing that there is those standards in place of how in which we serve clients, we support clients, and how in which we even, shape our culture so that we can be, best positioned to service our clients. I think all of that played a really important role in helping clients to feel more comfortable. And it's not to say that we don't ever so often get questions of, are you going to be involved in this? But
Mm-hmm.
it's certainly minimized. And so to me, that says that the steps that we've taken and the path that we're on is working and is really important.
And how did you know it was a leadership bench versus, you said there was a mindset shift there. So it wasn't just, I need more people to fill certain duties or
Yeah.
something like that. It was a leadership bench. So talk a little bit about what's the difference there between staffing up and building a
Yeah.
leadership bench.
Yeah. So when I was staffing up to really be able to scale and meet the capacity needs of our clients, I was looking at it more so of who can come in and project manage, right? Or even relationship manage.
Mm.
But that is completely different from who can come in and not only project manage, relationship manage, but also through their experience of critical thinking, critical reflection, strategic thinking. They can also build these strategic frameworks to help address some of the deep and customized solutions that our clients were looking for. We noticed a shift in our clients too after a period of time. While we had a number of clients that certainly were at ground zero with this work and they were looking for support that helped them to at least just build the foundation, right? We also had a number of clients that had already built the foundation and they were looking to go deeper. So they needed a more robust partner option that could help them to go deeper. And the individuals that were brought on to really just, again, kind of project manage and had lots of passion and even some great skill sets, they weren't to the level to where they could necessarily align with some of those really strategic, customized needs that we started to see.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then I think that sometimes when you are addressing the immediate need of an organization and you're looking to kind of build capacity and to address the volume of work, you sometimes rush to decisions that, quite honestly, you may not have fully, conducted the proper due diligence to make sure there's great alignment of values and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And so those are sometimes the growing pains of, being a relatively new founder. But what I'm fortunate to be able to share, Jennifer, is that I don't regret any of that. Although, because I've learned from all of those circumstances and those experiences, I think that it has made me a much more astute leader and decision maker. And so I think it's important for us to also focus on that. We're going to have to name the hard things and then act on the hard things. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not something that is just unique to a certain subset of entrepreneurs. It's really something that if you're going to find yourself in the entrepreneurial landscape, you're going to hit those moments and times, every so often. But what are you doing to grow from it?
Yeah. What were some of the things that have caused you to have the biggest growth? And often those are challenges. I'm not going to assume, but but what are some of those times?
Yeah. We are really fortunate at NWC that we don't have an external kind of sales, function that we have to align with on a day-to-day basis. It is all really, addressing the internal um, leads that come our way. And so most of our clientele come to us because they seek us out. And,
Mm.
that's a good thing. So,
Yeah, it's great.
we don't have huge issues in that regard. I will say that my background is marketing communications. You and I have talked about that in the past. I
Yeah.
really value that. I bring a lot of that, as a founder to the practice, the consultancy. And so I think that just being consistent with a really strong brand is important as well. We've worked really hard to establish ourselves as, thought leaders in this space with the voice of authority. Not just me, but also a lot of my colleagues on my team. But I do believe that a lot of it started with me, because again, my name is on the brand. Um, and by the way, part of one of the ways in which we help solve for that is, well, the name is Nika White Consulting. Most often when we talk about the firm, it's NWC. So I'm starting to, again,
Oh,
minimize
yeah.
me so that it's more about, the organization. But generally speaking, I think that success comes from doing good work, never being complacent. And so, one of our core values is continuous improvement. We're really committed to always leveling up, never shying away from opportunities where we need to reflect on and refine our work. And so that shows forth also in our efforts to continue to immerse ourselves in different strategies and knowledge and expertise that helps us to be smart partners to our clients who trust us.
Hmm.
And I think that's what keeps us really at the forefront of people's minds when they're thinking about a partner that they want to align with from DEI consulting perspective.
When you're thinking about building your team, what were some of the either things that you weren't as strong in or gaps that you felt like, okay, I really need to find somebody to do this better than I do?
Yeah, I love this question. There were a number of things. One of the things that we do often at NWC is we'll take the time as a team, particularly an executive leadership team, and we'll have conversations around what do we really enjoy about our role that we love doing, what do we feel like we're good at but we don't enjoy doing, because it's
Hmm.
really just to give us an opportunity to assess where can we shift, because I truly believe that when you have people in positions that align with their passion, their interest, and their skill sets, you're going to get the best outcomes. And so that exercise was really important for us. So for me, some of the things that I knew that I was not tremendously keen on is in terms of wanting as part of my day-to-day responsibilities was a lot of the being that process facilitator. I really wanted to
Mm.
be able to have someone that could facilitate all that, bring me in as the visionary, as the strategic thought leader, that sort of thing. I also knew that I needed support around the research and the data, analysis. While that's something that I'm trained in, I don't necessarily enjoy it. I want to be able
Mm.
to look at the report and to infer certain things that will help inform a strategic path forward plan. But to, analyze all the data, disaggregate all the data, again, I'm good at it, but it's not something that I really enjoy. And it takes a lot of time. And so when I weigh the
Yeah.
amount of time that takes and all of the other things that I need to fit into my day, it just also doesn't make good business sense. And so that was another area that I knew that I needed people to step in on. And just quite honestly, Jennifer, with the growth of our client roster, I knew that I could not be the main point of contact as that subject matter consultant across all of those accounts. I needed other people that could also step
Mm.
in, so that, again, I can start diminishing my day to day being in the trenches. So that the company is, running on its own without a significant reliance on me day in and day out.
Yeah. What kind of tools did you use? Any of those like strengths finders, or we just did Working Genius with our team, which was an interesting one. Did
Yeah.
you use those kinds of tools, or do you have your own process for finding out?
So a couple things. That's a great question. A couple things. So I am really big on strength finders. That is a tool that we use for at NWC. In fact, even before I make final hiring decisions, I tend to request our candidates, our finalists, to complete a strength finders assessment. We use that to help ground us and help us to have a level of understanding of where there's some strong superpower hours that we may want to be able to leverage for the output. But then it's also a way of just helping to determine kind of the interactions as we are getting to know our colleagues and really getting to understand, what helps them to thrive. So that's a really important tool. Outside of that, I will tell you that something else that we have been engaged in for quite some time now is the EOS system, the Entrepreneur
Oh,
Operating System. I don't know
yeah.
how familiar you are with that, but it was introduced to me through the women's business certification program that I'm a part of, WeBank, that I know probably many people that are hearing this message are familiar with. And but it provided this approach that we all could engage in as we were really defining what we wanted to be when we grow up as a company, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so a lot of what's entailed in that EOS process also has been really instrumental, and not only just helping me as founder and leader, but also helping others to understand the vision and the why behind our approaches and how we do things. And it's been really beneficial, even from the standpoint of rethinking like an org chart to then thinking about it as an accountability chart, right?
Yeah,
It's
so
not about
that's
individuals. It's more about what is the function of the role, because the names could change in and out.
yeah.
And so it's things like that that I believe has been really helpful for us.
Yeah, is that's the one I believe where they even talk about like how to structure your meetings, like the like
Yes. Level
bedrock
10
issues.
meetings. Yes, that's
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, I had
That's
a
it.
client who we worked very closely together, so I wasn't on the team, but
Yeah.
as they were doing that with their team, they invited me along to actually help facilitate some of the conversations, but
Yep.
also just to better understand what was going on. And I just found it really fascinating. I read, I think I can't remember the author's name. There were a couple books, but I read one of the
Yes.
books so that I could help and be part of that conversation. And I
Yep.
was like, this is so cool. And I loved that
If
focus on
yeah.
the roles and what people are supposed to do. And they had I recall like a lot of good stuff about handling tough conversations,
Yes,
like an
absolutely.
actual
So they call
process.
it radical candor.
Yeah.
And yeah, they refer to it as radical candor. And I will tell you that, as we were revisiting all of our core values, we ended up reimagining our core values because of the EOS system. And one of our core values now, we didn't go for radical candor, rather we went for constructive candor. We felt
Mm.
radical was a bit outside of the scope of what we wanted our culture to feel like, but
Hmm.
constructive felt more appropriate for us. And for us, when we talk about constructive candor, it is, we always speak our truths, but we do it in caring, courageous, and constructive ways. We welcome feedback and we seek and we share it often. If we cannot answer definitively, is this useful and helpful, then we need to be much more reflective before we engage in that type of dialogue or conversation. So EOS has been great for us. We really have appreciated what it has brought to our organization in terms of clarity and a deepened sense of where to place our focus from a infrastructure and a perspective.
Yeah. So how do you negotiate, like as you're building your leadership bench, how do you negotiate issues of authority, right? Like, so these people are leaders. So how does that work for your company? What does that mean when you're on the leadership bench?
Yeah, well, we are still, I would say, a rather flat organization. We are not a really large size. We don't have a really large size staff, and so it's still a relatively flat organization.
Okay.
But again, this phenomenon of building my leadership bench, I mean, we're only talking about a short period of time in which that's kind of been the main philosophy. And so, when you think about that, it requires really ensuring that this is a well-oiled machine before I think that you start creating more layers, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
haven't gotten there yet, but that is part of the steps to come. Um, and our business model is such to where not only do we have W-2 employees, we also have a pretty sizable group of colleagues that are consultant partners, and they're 1099
Mm-hmm.
support, and they also work very closely with us. And so that's not because of any other reason than that is the business model. We know that there's a lot of ebbs and flows into the consultancy business, and sometimes you need to have consultant partners that have specialized skill sets that you may not leverage every single day, so it doesn't make good business sense to have
Mm.
them on your W-2 employee list, but yet and still you do want to have that ongoing relationship where you can tap their skill sets where you may need to, based upon whatever clients' needs are at the time.
So where do you see things? We'll do two spots, maybe kind of end of the year, next 6 months, or is it even 5 months now? And then 3 or 4 years down the road. I feel like 5 years is a little just insane to even think about these days. So
No, I
kind of
know.
what's the
Um, Yeah, so I would say within like the immediate kind of near-term future, we're on a really good path. I want us to continue to lean fully into that, to continue to, build up our clientele and to do great work so that it shows for itself to where we continue to attract many different clients. I am working on book number 3 to release a little bit later this year, in partnership
congratulations?
with, thank you, in partnership with Forbes Books. And so that's been a really big undertaking. And I foresee that once the book releases, and even probably prior to the release of the book, I am going to be met with a lot of additional opportunities to speak and travel, particularly from an international perspective. And so it really is important for us to, over the next several months, to have a pretty solid plan in place, knowing that probably my availability will decrease in some capacity. I think that it's going to help the business though, because
Hmm.
obviously it's going to position us, I think, into the mindsets of different leaders that are looking to take their commitment of DEI to the next level. So I see that as also not only something that's going to create opportunities for me, but opportunities for me create opportunities for the business.
Yeah.
And so I share that in response to your question, because I want us to continue to even more so get hyper focused on our systems, our procedures, our processes, so that when that time comes, we are well positioned to have the leadership team, my leadership bench, to kind of again run the business on its own without me having to be intricately involved in the day to day.
Yeah, it's almost time to wrap up, but I do want to ask you about the books because you're on your third one now in a relatively short amount of time, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people just feel like I got to get a book and then I have authority and then it comes. But could you just talk a little bit about like how you're actually using them to grow your business, your role as an author? How does that actually
Yeah.
translate into growing the business, or how does it affect your business, or how are you using it?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, this was a very intentional decision when I was approached by Forbes. It was not a hard decision, to think about, really partnering with them in this regard, just because the Forbes brand is tremendous.
Hmm.
But even if it was not Forbes, it was some other maybe publisher, a lot of consultants will find it appropriate to help build up their subject matter expertise, at least the knowledge of their subject matter expertise, by writing a book and then being on the speaking circuit, and then being creating other content where they are positioned as a voice of authority. And so I was already on this path of producing a lot of content. I routinely have just made that a part of how I wanted to show up in this space, and how I wanted to kind of present myself as. And it was also a way of not only helping to educate, it was my way of building kind of a personal brand as a DEI practitioner. And so I think that when organizations are kind of in the spotlight because their leaders, their founders are constantly, doing things that help add value to the profession and to the industry, it certainly helps position the company as a brand to be trusted and to be in the consideration set when organizations are looking to partner. And that's why I truly believe that the work that we've done, since inception 5 years ago, has a lot to do with how we have positioned the company, and the fact that we
Hmm.
have been out there quite often as a brand that is helping to provide knowledge that's useful to a lot of audiences. And so I think that this book is also going to just help catapult that to the next level.
Awesome. So, just to close out, what have kind of been maybe one of the two or three biggest lessons from your first 5 years that you feel like you would just love every entrepreneur to know?
Yeah. Well, the first thing it's hard for me not to relate my answers, my response to this question, in absence of, the work that I care so deeply about, which is this DEI work. So the first thing is that I think it's important for leaders to realize that being inclusion minded is a leadership competency. It is a
Mm,
leadership function. And so if there are leaders that are listening to this, founders that are listening to this, and they begin to think, well, I've never have really given any intentional thought to incorporating a lens of DEI into my organization, I really strongly encourage them to take a step back and consider that.
mm,
The world is changing, the workforce is changing. There's so many different issues that are, causing, employees to certainly have an appetite for how in which they want to show up to the workplace, how they want to be treated. And we know through the Great Resignation or the Great Reevaluation, however you want to label it, that the decision making right now, rest a lot with the employees, right? They're in the
mm.
driver's seat. And so I would just encourage leaders who aren't already in the engagement of DEI, to think critically about that. I also want to share, and I posted this recently actually on Twitter, but I was just reflecting on some of my own experiences. And so I would encourage founders to own that role of a founder. And what I mean by that is don't be apologetic about your why, about your vision, about your non negotiables. I think that as a founder, you've earned that right. And it took me some time to even fully lean into that because I felt that even though I was the founder, I had to have consensus across, all of my teammates and all of,
Mm.
and no, there's a reason that I am a founder. There's a reason that I made that decision and took that leap of faith, and the risk involved in helping to create something that I felt like aligned with my personal convictions. And so it's okay to really lean into that. And then the last thing I would say is having a people centered, culture that is very much focused on humanity and empathy and compassion and inclusion and belonging is so critically important. I think that it's where you're going to see a differentiator between those organizations who are just producing an output versus those who are producing really solid, effective results.
Mm.
And it's all about how are we putting people first and how are we making sure that we are accommodating for the complex needs of all of our different colleagues that are joining us day in and day out.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. These
Thank
things seem to
you.
go, at least from my end, so fast. So I
They
appreciate,
do.
I really
They
appreciate the
do.
insights you've shared today. And for those who want to check this out or replay this, Hello Chaos podcast is on all the podcast platforms, YouTube, and you can also check us out in our digital zines that are rolling out in various cities. We're in Columbia, Charleston, and Greenville, South Carolina right now, coming to a city near you. You want to let us know? Email hello at orangewhip.com is the email. But thank you so much, Nika. I'm really looking forward to getting this one out and sharing your insights with folks.
Absolutely. Jennifer, thank you so much for having me. I wish you the best of luck to come, and I'm so glad to see you in this role.
Thank you. It's good to catch up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.